The entire world needs to wake up right now. And I believe that Charlie Kirk's murder has provided us an opportunity to do so, to stop with the left and right BS. And I do want to shout out my lefties here, because I felt like I was one of the only people on the right who was anti-vax before it was cool. Like none of my kids were vaccinated and people thought it was wacky. But before I got there, the lefty moms, left stream moms were actually the ones that were like very on it with like, what did these products? And that was like a weird place. I didn't kind of fit in conservative land. I am telling you, this is not a battle between left and right. Left and right, we are realizing something more sinister happened.
One day into a 10-day break from the internet, the world felt a little calmer. Candace Owens, who had been at the center of a storm after a high-profile death, stepped away, and suddenly the noise that had flooded feeds, the hot takes, the conspiracies, the relentless guessing, took a pause. For some, that pause was relief. For others, it was a frustrating silence. The fervor that followed tragedy did not vanish overnight, but the temporary absence of her voice made it possible for people to catch their breath and reconsider what had been said. In the weeks leading up to her hiatus, Candace dominated conversations. She pushed bold theories, demanded answers, and challenged mainstream readings of documents and events. Her critics accused her of hijacking grief and amplifying unverified claims. Her supporters praised her for confronting what they called inconvenient truths. The split reaction was predictable. What was less predictable was how forcefully she reframed herself, not merely as a provocateur, but as someone calling for unity across ideological lines in the wake of violence. There are several theories floating around about why she was so unrelenting. One view suggests political repositioning, that by reframing the debate, she could build influence beyond the traditional conservative base. Another theory points to attention dynamics. In a world where virality converts to leverage, escalating rhetoric sometimes becomes an incentive in itself. A more human explanation is grief-driven maximalism, that anger and sorrow cloud judgment and push people toward dramatic conclusions. All of these possibilities circulated online, were amplified, contested, and repackaged into memes, and none can be dismissed out of hand without evidence.
Now, usually we go, was he on the left? Was he on the right? Because that's the bait. The bait is to make me, as a conservative, hate you if you were on the left. And if you were on the left, the goal is to make you hate Candace, because it allows them to operate in broad daylight. This sport has been created, left versus right, that it's just the left. It's all left-leaning. No. They work with both the left and the right. Yeah, and sadly, the people that I am in partnership with on demanding more answers are not even people who were friends with Charlie Kirk. They're just like, obviously, this is wrong and this is weird and I'm on the left. She's allied with the left. Yep, I am allied with the left and the right. Jamie Lee Curtis, she's on the left, right? And she was crying over this. Totally different politics, the awakening that's happening right now, left and right coming together. Murphy writes, I'm a progressive. The question I have is from an LGBTQ person. I owe you an apology, Candace. As a former Dem, I am ashamed to admit that I've said some awful things about you. You know what, Rachel? I'll apologize back because I was also partially blinded and I thought that it was just the left. You know, I was taking that low-hanging fruit. Emails were like, you should look into this Governor Cox because he likes trans. So they're open and close. That feels to me always just like Fed bait, left versus right, right?
Candace's own framing pushed back against the simplest partisan reading. She publicly called for left and right to unify and to solve what happened, urging that the tragedy be a moment to reject baited left versus right fights. In her view, the polarized quarrels were distractions that allowed deeper forces to operate. She insisted this was not a left-only operation, nor purely right. Rather, she suggested a network that uses both sides to deflect scrutiny. It's an expansive claim, and one that, if proven, would be seismic. But such sweeping claims require proof, not just suspicion. She also pointed to unlikely allies as evidence of a broader concern, citing people who were not friends of the deceased, but who nonetheless felt something was off. These cross-ideological reactions, she argued, signaled a rare moment of consensus that warranted deeper inquiry. Candace leaned on her own past controversies as context, from vaccine debates to consumer advocacy, to show she had navigated different political worlds before, implying that current alliances should not be taken for granted. Yet several of the more explosive allegations that circulated were challenged by participants and journalists. Accounts of coercive interventions and secreted threats were disputed by attendees, and some messages released by the accused showed cordial exchanges that did not match the worst publicized narratives. Those rebuttals didn't settle every question, but they pushed parts of the conversation back toward verification and away from speculation. It's a reminder that public claims, to be credible, need corroboration. The human toll of the spectacle was stark. Families and close friends of the deceased were forced into repeated cycles of accusation and defense, complicating private mourning with public dispute. Grief, by nature intimate, became entangled with viral outrage. That double burden is heavy. Asking for accountability in public events is essential, but weaponizing suspicion against a bereaved family crosses a moral line. Responsible discourse must balance the demand for answers with compassion for those who are grieving. Strategically, some observers read her actions as an attempt to attract new constituencies. In a political environment where attention equals influence, appealing to constituencies on both sides of certain issues can expand reach. Whether that calculus was deliberate or instinctive is hard to untangle. Public figures' motives are often mixed and influenced by incentives that reward visibility. Then there is the simpler dynamic of attention economics. In a media ecosystem driven by clicks, the loudest assertions gain the most oxygen. That doesn't negate every sincere concern she raised, but it complicates evaluation of motive and merit. When commentary outruns evidence, the fallout can damage institutions, reputations, and the very causes commentators claim to defend. Institutionally, the ripple effects were real. Platforms wrestled with moderation decisions. Some tightened enforcement while others hesitated, citing free speech concerns. Newsrooms diverted resources to verify claims and to publish corrections where necessary. Donors and partners watched for reputational risk, and some reconsidered ties. The broader ecosystem paid a price. Time and attention that might have advanced the factual record were instead spent policing rumor and reaction.
People, so it has to be him. Like I said, MAGA, my dad's extra MAGA. That's supposed to make people that are on the left go, oh my gosh, see, it's because of MAGA dad. It's like so ridiculous. And then on the right, you're supposed to go trans. It's a trans person. We've talked about this and da-da-da-da. This is not left or right. I don't care. Do stop trying to make this a trans issue or right. That whole debate, it's low. It's not right versus left. It's not black.
As Candace entered her 10-day break, observers wondered whether the pause would cool the fever. Would clarity emerge as investigators and reporters sifted records and messages? Or would silence merely create space for new narratives to take hold? The answers depended on patient verification, and public patience is often in short supply. In the absence of evidence, people fill gaps with conjecture. There's a core lesson here about balance. Powerful voices calling for accountability can be vital to exposing wrongdoing. At the same time, truth matters. Demanding evidence before drawing public conclusions protects the dignity of the bereaved and preserves the credibility of civic life. The path forward after this episode requires a renewed commitment to verification, restraint, and empathy. For viewers, the choice is consequential. Join the rush to amplify provocative claims, or insist upon standards that distinguish reasonable skepticism from reckless speculation. The former fuels outrage, the latter preserves dignity and the possibility of meaningful investigation. As the public watched Candace take her break, the country waited to see which path would win. If we choose patience and truth over spectacle, we protect not only individuals, but the integrity of public debate for generations to come and future healing. In the days after Candace Owens stepped back, the controversy did not fade. It evolved. What started as a storm of accusations and conspiratorial speculation hardened into a wider argument about motive, meaning, and method. Reporters and commentators began to trace a pattern they say helps explain why Owens shifted so dramatically in public tone. The woman who once stoked the fiercest left versus right battles was now publicly courting the very audiences she had long derided. Observers point out something important. Candace Owens helped popularize tribal division. For years, she was a lightning rod of the conservative movement, mocking and attacking left-leaning figures and stoking culture war outrage. To see that same figure now pleading for unity struck many as jarring and, at worst, opportunistic. Critics argued she could not credibly claim to be transcending a fight she helped fuel. That criticism became central in the second chapter of the story. There are three broad explanations circulating for her pivot. The first is strategic repositioning. Some analysts argue Owens is attempting to expand her political capital beyond a conservative base that has splintered. By signaling openness towards certain left-leaning commentators and causes, she may be trying to build a new coalition, a cross-ideological bloc that could increase her influence in future cycles. That reading treats her rhetoric as calculated. The second explanation is attention dynamics. In the attention economy, visibility converts to leverage. Some critics believe Owens is addicted to the spotlight and will stoke controversy when it keeps her relevant. From this view, adopting grand, cross-ideological claims is a growth tactic. It fuels engagement, generates headlines, and keeps her name in the conversation. This is not a theory about sincere belief so much as about incentives. The third explanation is more personal: grief and jealousy. A fringe set of online theories suggested a turbulent personal backstory, asserting that romantic resentment or personal grievance might undergird her aggression towards certain figures. These claims range from plausible psychological accounts of grief-driven behavior to far more speculative narratives. Responsible reporting treats these as unverified rumor. They are notable only as social phenomena. Whatever explanation one prefers, it is critical to separate claim from fact. Much of the most dramatic material circulating online has been disputed by those named in the allegations, and in several instances, contemporaneous messages and public records undermine the more sensational narratives. Where a claim lacks corroboration, journalists and responsible commentators pushed back, asking for documents, timestamps, witnesses, and other evidence before concluding anything definitive. The effect of Owens' rhetoric, however, was not merely academic. It produced political and social effects. By pivoting rhetorically, she drew unlikely allies and intensified criticism from former fans. A handful of left-leaning figures expressed sympathy with calls for deeper inquiry. Conservative stalwarts who once lauded her frankness publicly rebuked her. This cross-pressured position amplified scrutiny, making Owens an even more polarizing public figure. Her new posture also invited moral questions. Families and friends of the deceased pleaded for restraint, arguing that a rush to sensationalism can inflict real pain on those who are grieving. The charge that she was hijacking grief resonated because it foregrounded the human cost of politicized speculation. Public inquiries and demands for accountability are necessary, especially when powerful people are implicated. But aggressive public conjecture, aired before verification, can harm people without a clear evidentiary basis. Beyond the emotional toll, there were reputational and institutional consequences. Allies worried about collateral damage to institutions she worked with. Donors and partners monitored reputational risk. Platforms examined whether they should label or limit her posts. Newsrooms diverted resources to verify claims and to correct falsehoods, and legal advisors considered the possibility of defamation suits where allegations crossed into the demonstrably false. In short, the controversy created cascading costs across media, legal, and political arenas. Part of the reason this episode became so combustible is how it fit into broader narratives about elites and the other. Owens framed the problem as an us versus them fight, elites versus ordinary people, truth versus deception. But critics noted a stark incongruity between that rhetoric and Owens' social position. She is affluent, well-connected, and part of a media class that benefits from attention economies. That dissonance fed accusations of hypocrisy and opportunism. Another notable dimension was the tactical use of ambiguity. Sweeping claims that something isn't left or right and that we must unite operate differently than tightly sourced investigative assertions. The former activate emotional responses and invite listeners to fill gaps with suspicion. The latter invite verification and evidence-based debate. Owens' rhetorical strategy, broad claims without immediately available corroboration, mobilized attention even as it raised serious questions about responsibility. When the dust settled enough to permit sober analysis, A modest set of facts remained clear. A prominent commentator made explosive claims in a moment of national trauma. Some of those claims were disputed by people directly involved. The public conversation intensified and produced harm to grieving people and reputations. And the episode exposed tensions about how influencers use mass platforms in moments of crisis. The civic lesson is straightforward. In high-stakes public moments, asserting urgency and demanding answers is vital. But urgency should never be a substitute for evidence. The responsibility for public figures is to calibrate their speech against what they know and can verify. Where that standard is not met, the costs can be severe for individuals, institutions, and the public trust. For audiences, the choice is also clear. Amplify provocative claims that inflame, or insist upon standards that preserve dignity and the possibility of real accountability. This chapter closes on an uncertain note. Theories will continue to circulate, and new claims will inevitably arise. Investigations, if conducted methodically, may illuminate motives and methods. Meanwhile, the public must decide whether the pursuit of immediate drama is worth the collateral harm it causes. If we want a more truthful and humane public square, the answer should be obvious. Demand evidence, resist the rush, and protect the dignity of those in mourning. Demand truth, compassion, and accountability always.